100 hours of relentless military warfare. Fighter jets dropping bombs over cities, tanks crashing through border fences, and over 3,000 human lives lost in less than 5 days. If you were to guess the cause of this conflict, you'd probably think of oil, territory, or deep-seated political ideologies. But the spark that blew up this entire powder keg came from a simple 90-minute game of football. In the summer of 1969, two neighboring Central American nations, El Salvador and Honduras, went to war. And sitting right at the bloody center of it all was a high-stakes World Cup qualifying match. This isn't a movie plot. This is the unbelievable, tragic, and true story of the football war. To understand how a football match turned into a war zone, we have to look far beyond the pitch. By 1969, tension between El Salvador and Honduras was already reaching a dangerous boiling point. El Salvador was the smallest country in Central America, but it was densely populated. Hundreds of thousands of Salvadoran farmers had crossed the border into neighboring Honduras in search of land and work. In fact, by 1969, over 300,000 Salvadorans were living in Honduras, making up nearly 20% of the entire rural population. But the Honduran economy was struggling. Facing intense pressure from native farmers, the Honduran government made a radical move. They launched land reform laws that effectively evicted thousands of Salvadoran immigrants, stripping them of their homes and forcing them back across the border. Media on both sides began spewing hatred. Social unrest was exploding, and both military dictatorships were desperately searching for a distraction. They needed something to unite their angry citizens. And that distraction arrived in June 1969, with the 1970 FIFA World Cup qualifiers. The World Cup qualifier was structured as a best-of-3 playoff series. The winner would get a ticket to the 1970 World Cup in Mexico. But instead of sportsmanship, what followed was pure psychological warfare. Leg 1 took place in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. The night before the match, thousands of Honduran fans surrounded the Salvadoran team's hotel. They beat drums, honked car horns, threw rocks, and smashed hotel windows to ensure the Salvadoran players couldn't get a single second of sleep. Exhausted and rattled, El Salvador lost the match 1-0. Leg 2 took place 1 week later in San Salvador, El Salvador. And the Salvadoran fans were out for blood. They didn't just target the team hotel, they set fire to the building, threw dead animals onto the grounds, and broke every window in sight. The Honduran players were so terrified they had to be escorted to the stadium inside heavily armored military vehicles under armed guard. El Salvador crushed Honduras 3-0. But as the Honduran team fled back home, violence erupted across the border. Salvadoran residents in Honduras were attacked, and thousands more were forced to flee for their lives. Sports had completely surrendered to political hatred. With the series tied 1-1, a decisive Game 3 was scheduled for June 27, 1969, on neutral ground in Mexico City. Over 20,000 fanatical fans traveled from both countries, separated inside the iconic Estadio Azteca by thousands of Mexican riot police. The match itself was an absolute war on grass. Tackle after tackle, the players threw everything into the game. Honduras scored first, but El Salvador fought back. By the end of 90 minutes, the score was deadlocked at 2-2. Then came extra time. In the 101st minute, Salvadoran striker Mauricio Pipo Rodriguez latched onto a cross and buried the ball into the back of the net. El Salvador won the match 3-2, officially qualifying for the 1970 World Cup. But back home, the final whistle didn't mean celebration. It meant on the exact same day El Salvador won the match, El Salvador officially severed all diplomatic ties with Honduras. Just 17 days later, on July 14, 1969, the conflict exploded into open warfare. The Salvadoran Air Force launched a surprise aerial bombardment against Honduran airfields and military bases. Moments later, Salvadoran ground troops backed by artillery launched a full-scale invasion across the Honduran border, rapidly advancing along the main highway toward the capital city. Honduras retaliated swiftly, using their superior air force to bomb Salvadoran oil refineries and fuel depots, cutting off the invading army's supply lines. For 100 straight hours, total war raged along the border. Modern tanks clashed, World War-era fighter planes fought intense dogfights in the skies, and innocent civilian villages were caught directly in the crossfire. War. Panicked by a full-blown war on the American continent, the Organization of American States rushed into emergency sessions. Under heavy international pressure and threats of economic sanctions, El Salvador finally agreed to a ceasefire on July 18. The fighting stopped after just 100 hours, but the damage was catastrophe on a massive scale. Over 3,000 people were killed, majority of them innocent civilians. More than 130,000 Salvadorans were forcibly displaced from Honduras, causing an economic and humanitarian crisis in El Salvador that eventually laid the groundwork for the brutal Salvadoran civil war a decade later. It took more than 10 years for both nations to officially sign a peace treaty in 1980. Football didn't invent the poverty, land disputes, or political corruption that divided El Salvador and Honduras. But it acted as the dangerous spark that ignited a long-festering flame. The 1969 football war remains a dark, chilling chapter in sports history, a tragic reminder of how national pride, when weaponized by politics, can turn a simple game into a deadly battlefield. What do you think about this wild story? Could something like this ever happen again in modern sports? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive historical story, hit that like button, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to Sports Pulse 3.0 for more incredible stories from the world of sports. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.